and I don't want you to directly, of course, you will go directly and think of the salvation and the justice and mercy, and that's not what I'm going to talk about. Today we are going to talk about what does it mean, justice of God? Because in so many times we think of justice in our ways, and we think that this is the justice, and then we feel like there is a big lack of justice in this world, and where is justice? And God is not fair. It's not fair to be this, to be that, and so on, because we actually think of the justice of God from our perspective. So today we are gonna talk about it a little bit together. So of course, we are getting, in so many cases, we get these questions either in our minds, or we get these questions from other people asking us these types of questions. Like, for example, if God is the Pantocrator, I think Pantocrator means what? ضابط الكل. If God really is the God in control, then how come, and then list of things like what? Yeah, for example, how come there are parts of this world they throw food, excess food, even more than what they eat, while there is another part of this world, people actually dies, and this is actually happening. People dies from famine. But one side, and it could be not too far of countries, مثلا, not too far of cities. In San Francisco, بلاش احنا عمالين from 2,000 feet نقرب. In San Francisco, somebody could be living in one of these high-rise buildings, few millions dollars, مش عارف, apartment, but the street next to it, the people are like suffering like tremendously. صح? How is this fair if God is the Pantocrator? How is this fair? Other question comes to mind, of course, we'll try to answer, but I'm not proving that God is fair. We'll end up by proving that God is fair and just. But for example, how is it fair that sometimes I have rights and I have all the rights, and then I go even through the justice system, and then I end up not getting my rights. Sometimes it happens. Many cases, by the way. It doesn't mean that you have the right. When you go to the justice system, you end up having your right and getting your right. It happens so many times that you end up losing it. Tricky one. How come and how is it fair that somebody is born with disability while somebody else is like not born, like born very healthy? Born with disability or born healthy. How is this fair? Right? We think about these things and like, where is the justice? If God is just and He's the Pantocrator, how is this things happening? How come? How is it fair that if somebody is like born in a wealthy family, شايفين this photo of people like family of four, مش رايحين بقى with their luxury car, with their private jet, while others are born in a very less fortunate families. We think about all of these things. And that part also, born Christian, non-Christians, and so on. I want to tell you that it's not only us that we're asking these questions in these days. In the Bible, and we'll take few examples from the Bible, that people ask very similar questions to what we are asking right now, and I'm sure that in generations to come, they will still be asking the same questions again and again. حد يعرف who's Gideon? Gideon كان ايه في البايبل؟ a judge, صح؟ كان judge, كان قائد. And judge, when we say judge, by the way, in the Bible, we mean leader. Not a judge اللي هو he's sitting and judging, لا, is a leader يعني. The era of judges, which is right after the Exodus, and they went all the way from Egypt, they went and they made it to the land of Canaan, right? And then this is the era of judges. And Gideon, Judges بقى يعني God allowed it was a cycle that kept repeated many times during this judges era اللي هو وفيهم so many judges like Gedwin is one of them, Samson for example, Shamshun, Deborah, Samuel of course was the last one, but anyway, you know, Gedwin asked this question that he was asking to the angel of God, if God is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Isn't this a very familiar question that we hear and we ask ourselves with? لو كان ربنا موجود, then why is all of these things happening? صح? So Gedwin, I think this is roughly how many years before Christ, the era of Judges? We are talking about مثلا 1200, 1300 before Christ. Will questions that you have been asked? بس يعني before I get to the answers, بس I don't want to skip this. Gedwin actually, when he asked this, he forgot something, which we often also forget intentionally or unintentionally. Yani. In the same chapter, see this verse actually came in Judges chapter 6. If anyone now open chapter 6, Judges chapter 6, you will find that the first verse in this chapter says that, and the Israelites made evil before God, and God delivered them to the Midianites. So he left this part, Gedwin, and then he's asking the question of, if God is here, then why is this happening to us? But he left part of the story, and he focused only on one spot of the story. But it's in the same chapter, and this was the cycle, by the way, that was repeated in the book of Judges at least 12 times, at least. It's around 14, but يعني, some books says 12, but يعني, regardless, it's not dogma. But يعني, the same cycle اللي هي people do evil before God, and then they are delivered in the hands of other people, and then they go back and they cry to God. So God sends them a judge, a leader, like Gedwin was one of them, and then God save them from this other nation that defeat them, and then they celebrate their victory, and then few months later they go into the same cycle again, like they do evil again before God. It's a cycle that we all go through. But anyway, so Gedwin asked the same question. Somebody asked also the same question or similar question, Job asked it in a different way. Job asked it in this way. I will say to God, do not condemn me. From the beginning, he's setting the rules. God, I'm going to talk. من الأول كده, don't condemn me. Because what's coming, you will not like. Show me why you contend with me. Does it seem, it's very harsh. Does it seem good to you that you should oppress? انت شايف ان حاجه كويسه انك تظلم؟ بقول ربنا. Actually, we do the same, very similar things, and we put claims against God that He's not fair, He's oppressing, He's the zalim, وهكذا. Many others in the Bible. If we look at the Bible, David did it so many times. We can go on and on in the Bible, and so many have asked the same question that we are asking. يعني إيه ممكن نطمن من الناحية دي شوية. This question is asked many times. It's by the way, it's okay to ask, but we cannot stop here. We have to continue on. So we need to understand بقى together كده. أنا دلوقتي هنبتدي into the answering part. Okay? We need to understand together and agree on few concepts on this justice thing, so that we can at least answer these things to ourselves. One is, what was promised to us أصلا, so that we can look at this and see if it is happening or not happening. What was promised? اللي هو زي الكونتراكت. أنا يعني كتبتها هنا contract يعني مجازا طبعا, as if there is a contract. مش يعني there has to be some agreement And if this agreement or promise is not fulfilled, then it's not fair. صح؟ But actually what was promised to God, from God to us? God actually gave us this promise that in the world you will have tribulation. So there was no promise that we'll have a very easy life. This promise is not there to start with. He never promised us with that. He actually told us clearly that in this world, we will have tribulations. Okay, suffering is part of it. Yes, there will be. Maybe you will have some happiness and joyful times and so on, but you will also have tribulation. This is what is there. But he did not stop here. But be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. When did he overcome the world, and when we will see this? When will I see that? When will I see God? When he came on earth, did he show that he overcome the world? He was crucified. He was humiliated. He did not show that part, right? He defeated the death, of course, by the resurrection. But when did he overcome this whole world? And I will see this victory, and everybody will see this victory in heaven. This is when I see all the victorious, like God. This is when I see it, which means that there is another part of the story. The story does not end up here. This is what we really need to understand to answer these questions. We take part of the story, which is now, and say this is not fair, this is not just, and we throw claims on God. But one, we need to look at the promise, because we are not promised otherwise. We are promised with heaven, yes, and this is what will happen. But we are never promised by an easy life or a smooth life, no problems, no health issues. We've never been promised with that. That's number one. So it looks like the other part of the story. But before, احنا لسه we're in number one, and I want to elaborate a little bit to really explain it in a better way. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus, we all know the story, صح? We know the story. The rich man with Lazarus, he was sitting begging for. بصوا how clear this concept is that was given to us from God in this parable. نقرأ كده. That's in Luke chapter 16. Okay? So there was a certain rich man. كل rich man هتلاقيهم بالريد كده. Okay? فاحنا أنا في البلو. خلينا في البلو. So there was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen. صح؟ يعني visualize it. هو ده البارت بتاع. This is the part of the story that was. The rich man, he has very nice life ولinen وحاجات جميلة كده. إنما بقى let's look at the other guy, the certain beggar. But there was a certain beggar named Lazarus. كان ماله بقى? What was his condition? Full of sores, who was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with the crumbs. That is his condition. Full of sores, desiring crumbs from the food, right? Which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. So this is now part of the story. This is part of the story. This is the first episode of المسلسل اللي احنا بنتفرج عليه, right? To visualize it, راجل عايش في تنعم جميل جدا وفرحان ومبسوط والحياة جميلة وإيزي. واحد تاني متبهدل يا عيني وحالته حالة right? If I stop here and draw a line, there is no justice. And this is what often we fell into. We stop here as if the story ends here. And if I stop my chapter in here, يبقى عندنا حق ونقول لربنا انت مش عادل. انما let's look at the other part of the story, which we always should think of. before we throw these claims in. The same chapter, the same, we just continue with it. So it was that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. So what happened to this guy? When he died, he was carried by the angels to the bosoms of Abraham. Okay. والراجل بقى اللي كان متنعم واللي كان مبسوط واللي كان عايش حياته did not even try to look at this beggar. What happened to Lazarus يعني? What happened to him? The rich man also died, of course, and was buried and being in torments in Hades. So that is the second part that we often forget to look at. And that is why the concept of justice is very difficult for non-believers to grasp and understand. And that is why we find a lot of them they have a lot of suffering to understand, and sometimes getting into some psychologies, challenges, and so on, because they cannot understand this part. If I look only at this world and I draw a line, there is no justice. But we have never been promised for justice and full justice here in this world. But we need to remember that. Right. See here what in the New Testament, what God clearly told St. Peter. St. Peter, and we can read this in John 13. He was telling St. Peter that what I am doing, you do not understand now, but you will know after this. And this should be like something engraved in our mind, that when I'm faced with some situations that I really cannot understand, which will happen, and it can happen, and it's very fair to feel this way, that God, I don't know what has happened. Why is this happening? I really don't understand. And I feel that it is not fair now. I feel I'm troubled. It's okay to feel this way, but we cannot stop here. We have to keep saying this part that was told to us, that God, I don't understand now, but I'm sure that you will reveal to me later on. This later on can be it can be in this world. It can happen. But if it didn't happen in this world, it will happen in the next chapter. Because إلهنا إله أحياء مش إله أموات. فإحنا ما فيش الموت ده. إحنا we pass. We don't really يعني die وخلاص. إحنا we pass this world عشان ندخل للحياة التانية. عشان نكمل الحياة. But we have to keep this in our mind. So number one, in answering, we said no, we need to remind ourselves what was promised to us first, so that we can يعني say if it's just or not just, بقى fair or not fair ومش عارف. That was number one. Number two was who actually defined justice. يعني how can you really say that this is just and this is not just. This is fair and this is not fair. Who defined this term? If we go with the worldly explanation, there are so many things will not be fair. بس ربنا عنده different ways, and he explained this to us in another parable بتاع land owner والlaborer. And we can find this in Matthew 20, and I didn't put it here عشان هو long one, but do you know this parable اللي هو a landowner, he went out early morning, recruited laborer to come and work in his vineyard, and he agreed with them. Listen to this. In the early morning when he called them to come and work, he agreed with them. That's a contract. He agreed with them to give them at the end of the day 1 denarius. That's a contract. He agreed with them. Okay? But then he left for them to work. And then he came back on the third hour. While walking, he found more people, more laborers looking for work. He asked them, why don't you come and work? And I will give you whatever is right. He did not tell them denarii or not, well, how much. He told them, I will give you whatever is right. Who left? وبعدين came back in the 6th hour, did the same thing, came back in the 9th hour, did the same thing, came back in the 11th hour. خلاص فاضل only 1 hour في اليوم ولا حاجة كده. And he still recruited laborers and told them, go and work and I will give you what's right. The end of the day came, he called all the laborers to give them their money, their wages. And he started كده, imagine كده يعني كان في طابور واقف, a queue كده, starting from the people who worked from the 11th hour, or the people who worked the full day was back at the end. So he started with the people who worked in only 1 or 1.5 hours ولا حاجة كده, and he gave them 1 full denarii. 1 full, which is a wage for 1 full day. Of course, these people were super happy, and they left. But what happened is the people who are at the back, they looked at this, oh, this guy took a denarii, and I worked for like 8 hours, so 8 multiplied by 1, I will be getting 8. But he forgot the contract. When I recruited you, I told you I'm going to give you 1 denarii, right? So that's why when their turn came, and this guy, this landowner, he gave them only 1 denarii, they were very angry. And they complained and said, like, this is not fair. I worked the full day. I actually, like, I worked on the sun and the heat and blah, blah, blah. But these guys, they worked only for 1 hour. How come you give them this? Did you see what happened here? They did not look at the promise. What I promised you is 1 denarii. What I give others, that's my money, and I can give to whoever I want, whatever I want. Why did you take this and called it unfair? Who actually, which scale did you put this on to call this unfair or unjust? Which scale? Actually, it's amazing concept. You know, God actually looked at these people of the 11th hour, and he did not look only on how many minutes they worked. He looked at other situations. They actually were waiting since morning, and the parable tells us this when we read in the details. They were actually waiting since morning for somebody to recruit them, but it didn't happen. They were waiting. They were trying to get work, but nobody recruited them. But they did not lose the hope, and they kept waiting and waiting for somebody to recruit them till the 11th hour. كان ممكن جدا. In the middle, they just, it's not happening today. خلاص, I'll go home and we'll see what happens. They kept waiting with hope لغاية لما جالهم الشغل. God looked at this. The way we look at justice, the worldly way, we put our own rules and then we scale everything on our measure that we created, actually, not based on any contract or promises or verses from the Bible ولا حاجة. احنا we do our own contracts and then بحاسب ربنا حسب اللي انا في دماغي مش اللي اتفقنا عليه. فاهمين قصدي؟ It happens in so many cases. يعني that's number 2 that to look at. So what defines justice? We have to be careful that sometimes we define justice in our own ways. يعني. Okay. The third point and the last one. بعد كده هنتكلم في حاجة تانية. بس the third point that we look at بقى an amazing concept بجد في الجاستس بتاعت God ده. عارفين ليه amazing؟ لأنه it can never be fulfilled ولا nobody can fulfill this concept except God only. عارفين ليه؟ عشان he actually deal with each and every one of us according to your capabilities, to your talents, to your circumstances, to your problems, to your challenges, each and every one of us. Imagine, can this ever happen في أي حتة تانية away from God? Good luck. Go كده to any judge وقول له أصل أنا ما كنتش عارف القانون. في طبعا جملة معروفة في مصر إن القانون لا يحمي اللي زي حالاتي. يعني بس يعني قصدي إنه مفاهيم العالم مختلفة خالص. ولا يمكن this type of justice be fulfilled anywhere else away from God. Where am I getting this from? Am I making this up? عارفين بانت في أكتر من مكان بس let's read this together in Luke 12. But he who did not know yet committed things deserving of stripes shall be beaten with few, only few, عشان ما كانش عارف. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. يعني it's not the same مسطرة that ربنا مستخدمها لكل الناس كده. No. And I think it answers also one of the questions كانت لسه سيلفيا بتسأل بتقول Christians or non-Christians. Don't worry about it. Do not worry. Our God is just. Is just. I don't know what will happen. I don't know. But all what I know is, and my faith is, that my God is just. What is he gonna do? I don't know. And it's not my issue. But I'm sure that he's just. في very well known برضه story في البايبل بتاعت the two mites. الست اللي حطت الفلسين دول. صح؟ It tells us clearly the measures that God used in justice. So she put, of course we all know the story. You know, كان كلهم رايحين to put donations ومش عارف ايه كله بيحط وطبعا يسمعوا the sound of the denarius ومش عارف ايه نازله في الصناديق. And this poor lady she went and she put only 2 mites. That's all what she had. هم فلسين. بص ربنا قال عليها ايه؟ Assuredly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than. How is this fair? لو هي نفس الميجر هي حطت فلسين والتاني حط 100. ازاي تقول عليها حطت اكتر؟ مش حطت more value مش more valuable ده بيقول ان هي حطت اكتر. طب ازاي؟ فين الميجر؟ Because he deals with his justice is different than the world justice. Because he looked at this situation, he knows that she's in definite need of these two, and she put them. So for me, these are much more than the 100 and 1000 ومش عارف ايه اللي بيتحطوا. So he looked at her circumstances, her condition, her needs, her decisions, her actions, and then he put his judgment. فاهمين قصدي؟ he's gonna do this with each and every one of us. عشان كده this cannot happen anywhere else except that God has to do it. مفيش حد ولا ال AI ولا الكلام ده هيعرف to have data for each and every one, his circumstances, his decisions, his intentions, his مش عارف ايه وبناء عليه will take a decision. That can never happen. إنما عند ربنا only. In his justice, this is there. أيوة يعني أبونا بيقول لنا زي customize يعني عنده customize لكل واحد فينا. طبعا مش مقصود بيها إنه الخطية هتبقى الخطية خطية والغلط غلط والصح صح. بس أنت يعني مثلا عشان نقرب الفكرة شوية يعني مثلا حد ما بيقدرش عنده صحته فيها حاجة مش سليم صحيا قوي. هل ربنا يجي يقول له انت ما خدمتش في القرى والجري بتاع القرى مش عارف ركبتش قطارات عشان تروح القرية تساعد مش عارف مين زي بقية الناس؟ لا طبعا صح. طب حد ربنا ما ادالوش يعني ان هو يبقى معاه فائض او فلوس يقدر يدي كتير قوي فدي حاجه صغيره جدا ربنا هيحاسبه؟ لا طبعا. ما هي باينه اهي في الست اللي ادت 2 مايتس اون. فاهمين؟ فاتس نوت ذا سيم يعني سكيل. اوكي. there is when are we gonna say احنا we have this thoughts in our mind about unfair و unjust وبنسمع الحاجات دي كتير. امتى بقى in the Bible that is mentioned بقى العدل كمل اتقالت فين؟ في سفر الرؤيا. ليه في الريفيليشن؟ عشان خلاص that is the second part of the story اللي احنا لسه مش عارفينها ومش شايفينها ومش هنعرفها غير لما نوصل ان شاء الله، نوصل كلنا سوا. هنا only بقى في ريفيليشن نسمع دي ونشوفها ونقول انه for true and righteous are his judgments. دلوقتي عرفت؟ yes دلوقتي عرفت، لانه خلاص he will reveal all of this to us but when we come to that point. But now we have to live with faith. That is why I'm going to end up with this بس يعني آخر فكرة يعني. We have to end up with كل دوت two things واحنا دلوقتي على الأرض. حاجة we should get worried. We should get worried because God is just. يعني دي مش فكرة اللي هي الجاستس دي إن هي تريحنا وتطمنا وكل حاجة will be revealed. Actually everything will be revealed can make me, somebody like me, worried more. عارفين ليه؟ لأنه كمان في Galatians في غلاطيا I think غلاطيا 6 يقول كده إنه الله لا يشمخ عليه. God is not mocked. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. عارفين يعني ايه الله لا يشمخ عليه؟ يا ربنا بالعربي كده ما يضحكش عليه. And everything will be revealed. لا يشمخ، ما يضحكش عليه. ممكن امثل قدامكم ان انا القديس وواقف بدي وعظات ومش عارف ايه. لو ده مش في قلبي كل ده will be revealed. But it should get me worried. And our God is just. He's just. فاحص القلوب والكلى، فهو he's just وما يضحكش عليه، فممكن نعمل اللي احنا عايزينه في الاخر everything will be revealed. فيبقى موضوع ان هو just makes me worried. I have to be careful because he's just and he knows my capabilities. مش هقدر اضحك اقول له اصل انا ما كانش عندي وقت، بس انا كنت مشغول. God knows that if you want to make time you will make time. حتى احنا في الانجليش بنقولها you will make time. مش when you have an extra time. I will make time to come and serve. I will make time to come and pray. I will make time to do this. I make time. واحنا هنخلق وقت؟ لا، معناها انه I'll make time within my busy schedule بس I can make. فقصدي يقول الله لا يشمخ عليه. God is not mocked. ما نحاولش نطبطب على نفسنا لانه everything will be revealed. والفكرة الثانية تريحنا من أنهي ناحية؟ I'm not worried of what I see now. Either what I see with happening to people or what's happening in my life now. I can get into tribulations and I feel that it is, why is this happening to me? I'm doing all my best and blah, blah, blah. But Joseph, of course, we know in some stations of his life, if he stopped there, أنا بتباع as a slave. I'm getting sold as a slave. What is this? Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? أنا مش فاهم. What's happening? بس if he stop here, لا لسه جاي. It can be يعني I can see this justice here in this life. If I didn't see it here, I will see it in my next life, in my other life اللي هي في heaven. آخر حاجة أقولها موضوع was born with disability وكده. عارفين طبعا the born blind، الستوري بتاع البورن بلايند. في أحد الآباء كده كان عمل تأمل جميل أوي، تخيلي بس تأمل جميل أوي. قال عارفين إحنا if we get this born blind man after the miracle he gained his sight back مش back يعني he got his sight وكده. If I get this man and I ask him a question, would you actually have preferred to stay blind for 30 years and then meet with Jesus and know God and meet with him like physically and in your heart and be like a great believer بعد كده بعد ال 30 سنة اللي قعدتهم دول؟ ولا do you prefer better ان انت لا تبقى مفتح من اول حياتك وما تتقابلش خالص مع ربنا طول حياتك وتخلص حياتك من غير ما تشوف ولا تقابله؟ فالاب دوت اللي بيتامل قال انه انا بتوقع انه اكيد كان هيختار انه انا I'm okay ان انا اقعد blind for 30 years بس for the sake of ان انا اتقابل مع ربنا وجها لوجه ويعمل معايا المعجزه، وبعد كده اكمل حياتي ما تبقى من حياتي على الارض معاه، واكمل بعد كده حياتي وانا في حضنه. ف don't look at the story at any like spot on the story, just think of the rest of the story. We'll think of the promises, we'll think of who defines justice and like what is the definition of justice لحسن اكون انا حاططها من دماغي, and then think of how amazing the concept of justice with God, which is يعني the customized one اللي هو he has a scale for each and every one according to your capabilities, your condition, your situation, your كل حاجة في حياتك. Okay? And glory be to God forever. ربنا يبارك.